Okay, so if you open up Yismach 226, you will see a piyut, which is quite famous. Does anybody want to look at it and tell me if they recognize it? Does it ring any bell? The bottom of it starts in the bottom of 226 and goes over to the next page. Does this piyut, does this prayer ring any bell? Have you heard it before?
Yeah.
Michael, does it ring a bell to you?
We say this during Yom Kippur.
Yes. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur we say it. Yeah. What's it called?
Chol Ma'aminim.
Chol Ma'aminim, right?
Yeah,
there's the various famous tunes for that.
Yeah.
Some people do Chol Ma'aminim, right? It rings a bell. Everybody remembers this? There's other famous tunes. What else do we have? There's also the Nusach, which is more of a Chol Ma'aminim, right? Okay, if you daven in different shuls, maybe there's different tunes, but everybody around this table remembers this, right? You've heard of it, it rings a bell. Okay, good. And we're calling this V'chol Ma'aminim. Now, let's read some random lines in English, and let's turn over the page to 227. Let's just start off, right? The first line. And all believe that he remembers the covenant. He apportions life to all living beings. Okay, doesn't seem to be any obvious connection between those two sentences. Just to, could have just as well been. Read the next line. All believe that he could have just been. Yeah, all believe that he lives and is eternal. He is good and does good to the wicked and to the good. Again, if you read it, let's read a few more lines. All believe that he is good.
That sounds a little paradoxical. He does good to the wicked. Like, what is good?
He does good to the wicked and to the good.
So the wicked people deserved his goodness.
No, even the people he does. In other words, he does good even to those who are undeserving of good. We're going to go through every line and explain what each line means, hopefully. But at this point, what I'm trying to point out is that it seems to just be a whole bunch of random sentences that have pretty much nothing to do with each other. All believe that his hand is... all believe that he pardons forever. He is the Most High, and his eye is directed to all those who fear him. Again, two things about God that don't seem to be in any way actually connected. Another thing that you'll notice, if you look at the Hebrew side, it'll be easier to see this, that the first line of the prayer, of the piyut, of the poem on 226, it's one phrase. All subsequent lines are two phrases. Sorry. And besides the last line is again one phrase at the end of 227. You see that?
No. What do you mean?
If you look at the
one line at the bottom.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
One line at the top, hose.
Ha'oches biyad midas
mishpat.
Mishpat.
That's a line.
That's one phrase. All the other lines of the piyut have two phrases to them. V'chol ma'aminim. Right? And then the last line is also only one. Now here's another interesting thing. This piyut has basically two columns. Let's just use the right-hand column and the left-hand column. It's obviously, you won't be able to see this in the English, but if you look at the Hebrew, you'll see this. And each column goes with the aleph base. So if you look at the first column, the first line, let's start from V'chol Ma'aminim Shahu. That's the same on each line, right? The aleph base starts on the fourth word. The first three words of each line are exactly the same. V'chol Ma'aminim Shahu, V'chol Ma'aminim Shahu, and then you go Kail is aleph, Boichen, Beis, Gimel, Dayan, Hey, Vav, all the way through till the end, right? Now, then look at the left line. Also the same thing. It goes all the way. Yeah. Now, if you look at the left side, you have the same thing, right? Goes. Just start from anywhere. You'll see the first letter of the left side is always a hey, but the next letter goes in the order of the alphabet. You see that, Reuven? Beis, Gimel, Dalet, etc. Yes? So obviously that's one aspect of the poem that is a little bit lost in the translation because you don't have the sequence in... Okay.
I was actually looking for it when we first started, because there are other piyutim that are either someone's initials or, a pasuk, like it's, yeah.
Exactly.
Really is the first letter of the first word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Now, so there seems to be a lot of rhythm here, but there's also seems to be some disconnect. What's going on over here? It seems to be a little bit, again, like we saw, the sentences don't have anything to do with each other. Now, let's try an exercise. Let's move everything up. Imagine in your head, everything was moved up one line. So, for example, you have the first line, which, like we said, was half a line. Ha'oches biyad midas mishpat. And then, the first half of the next line, move it back to be on the same line as that. So as if it said on one line, Ha'oches biyad midas mishpat, v'chol ma'aminim shu ke'lamuna. That was the line, right? And then the next line would start with Ha'boichin u'voidei kinzei nistares, and continue in the same line, v'chol ma'aminim shu boichin kloyes. Now, what would change if we did that? First of all, it would all be equal. There would be it would just be 22 line poem. It wouldn't be 21 lines and then half a line before and half a line after. And then the aleph would be 2 alephs per line on the first line, 2 base on the second line, 2 gimel on the third line, etc. It would all be neat in the lines. And most importantly, now the 2 halves of the line would not just have the right letter and the right amount of words, but they would actually create a coherent sentence. Let's turn back to page 227, and I'll read it to you. Imagine the line went like this. He apportions life to all living beings, and all believe that he lives and is eternal. Now that's a sentence. All right, let's try the next one. He is good, and does good both to the wicked and the good, and all believe that he is good to all.
Yes.
Now that's a sentence, right? You follow me here?
Yeah.
He knows the inclination of all creatures, and all believe that he has formed them in the womb. And the reference is that if he's formed them in the womb, then he knows them. If he formed them, then he knows them. Right? He is all-powerful and contains them all, and all believe that he is all-powerful. Right? So now we could suddenly see, actually there is a theme, there is some sense to this poem. Now actually, until recently, not just until recently, even currently, this is what we call the new print, which is the annotated Chabad Machzor. If you take the old, quote-unquote old, the old Hebrew, the old-fashioned print,
the original,
it actually is printed that way. And this annotated Machzor changed it.
why?
And you would think, why'd they change it? It's just messing it all up. And it's not just Chabad and annotated. If you look in many Machzorim that are printed nowadays, many of them are changing it to this, what would seem nonsensical formatting or layout of the page.
So what's the assumption that it wasn't it was originally organized like that, like it was like you're saying it's
Exactly.
in order in the
Yes,
sentences,
exactly.
and somebody changed it.
Yes,
somewhat?
and I'm going to explain why.
Did you say who wrote this and when?
I did not say who wrote it and when, but I could tell you that. This is, when, I'm not 100% sure, I have to check it up, but the author is a famous poet by the name of Yanai. There's a number of the piyutim that we say that are authored by him. His name is Yanai, and he's the author of this poem. Before I explain why and how this switch of the layout on the page happened, I want to point out another thing, and that is that when you sing this in the words, so there's a tune. It's very important, I believe. To me, it's important, and that when we sing tunes to do with davening, that the tunes match up with the words that you're saying. And when really, davening is not about singing. Singing is there to enhance the davening. And to my mind, if we're singing songs that don't fit with the words, whether it doesn't fit because the commas and the punctuation come in the wrong place, or whether it's like you're singing a fast, dancey melody to a solemn prayer, and things like that, it doesn't really match up. So part of the job of the chazan is to choose appropriate tunes to the appropriate pieces of the siddur and the machzor, and to make sure it matches up. Now here, the tunes that people sing, for the most part, match up, but sometimes you have to adjust it a little bit. So, for example, if we're singing this tune that we sang before, right? So now let's let's work with the Hebrew side of 227. All believe that he remembers the covenant, who apportions life to all living beings. Okay? No problem with that. Next line. Now here you have to adjust the tune a little bit, because you could see that they've put a comma after the first word. Because it's hatoiv, he is good. Omeitiv l'roim v'latoivim, and he does good to the wicked and to the good. But if you just sing it in the default way, hatoiv omeitiv l'roim v'latoivim, then it doesn't make any sense. You're saying he is good and does good to the wicked and to the poor and to the good. Oh. Right? You see? Let's go down to the line with Serleach Selo. So if you count from the top of the page, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. Which would be that would translate to he is most high, and his eye, comma, is directed to those who fear him, as opposed to ha'elyon, comma, who is most high, comma, and his eye is directed to those who fear him. Right? So do you see how it's so important when you're singing it to pay attention to what the words actually mean? Because the default tune fits for most of the lines, but some of the lines you have to adjust the tune a little bit to put the comma, the pause, in the part of the sentence that actually makes sense. Right? So as we're going to go through, and actually you'll see that there's at least one place in this that they've put a comma in the wrong place. If you look 5 lines down from the top of the page, the second half of the line, it says Halom b'seisa b'tzeil, comma, Shaddai, Shindalud Yod, which they've translated as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He is omnipotent, abides in mystery and shadow. And hopefully, if we have time together, you'll see that that's actually a misunderstanding on the part of the compilers of this machzor, which caused them to put a comma in the wrong place. But there's other examples. If you look down, the third to bottom line and the second to bottom line both have commas in there. And when you sing it, it would be Hashaveh o mashveh koton v'gadol rather than Hashaveh o mashveh koton v'gadol, right? Which again, if you look in the English, you'll see the comma has to be in a place where the sentence structure fits with the tune. Otherwise, the tune doesn't enhance the prayer; it just makes it meaningless. Okay, what's going on over here? Piyut, poetry in davening, has a very long history, going back thousands of years. There is an argument that many historians make. I don't know that this can be verifiably proven, but it certainly makes sense, that the big boost in poetry entering our liturgy happened at a time in Israel when you're talking about, I believe this goes to I don't know, possibly even like 10th century around. I'm not so good with the dates, but basically at a time when under Roman rule there were decrees against reading the Torah in shul. So they had prayers, but they weren't allowed to read the Torah. The whole idea of reading the Haftorah also comes from that period, where at some point that Haftorah was substituting the reading of the Torah. But because there wasn't the opportunity to read the Torah, and the reading of the Torah wasn't done as it's done today, we just read it. It was read, and there was a Meturgaman who would give the translation into Aramaic, which was the local tongue, and the translation wasn't necessarily only a strict translation, it was also a chance, that was kind of the rabbi's speech. You know, he would speak about the parasha. That was part of the Meturgaman. He wasn't just there to translate, he was also there to elaborate on the ideas of the parasha, or the ideas of the holiday. So, in its original form, piyut goes all the way back to then, when it was, this is a suggestion, that some piyut would go into a lot of details of the stories of different things, or again, Purim, about Haman, and whatever, etc., are all there to give us the history which we would have gotten from the reading of the Torah, and it was transformed into the poems. Be that as it may, that was really a very side point. The main point that I'm trying to make is that piyut is very, very old, and it's gone through hundreds of years of thousands of editions and different renditions and customs, etc. To the extent that nowadays we're saying a tiny fraction, of the amount of poems that they were saying 500 years ago in Germany, for example. I mean, we're Ashkenazim, we're doing the Ashkenazi versions of the piyutim. Sfaradim have very different ones. They were saying many, many more piyutim, and we have a tiny fraction of them left. I mean, we have more.
They're not still in a written form, and we don't
many
know
of them.
What they are, or we just
There's many of them that we don't know what they are at all, and more are being discovered.
How do we don't know them?
Because sometimes there's references to them.
Okay.
In old manuscripts, and there's constantly more piyutim being discovered. I mean, one of the hugest treasure troves of piyutim is from the Cairo Geniza, where they've found thousands of things. But the point is that things develop over time, and inaccuracies creep in. And don't forget, nowadays every individual has the machzor. Once upon a time, there was one person in the room who had a written or even a printed or whatever, either written or printed siddur. And you know who that one person was?
The wealthiest person.
No.
The rabbi?
No.
The chazan.
The chazan.
Okay.
The chazan had the one edition, and most people were not saying any of these poems. They were just listening to the chazan saying it. And many of the poems that everybody says, if you actually read them carefully in English, you'll see there are sentences that creep in here and there that don't make any sense for everybody to say. Like, for example, just one thing that comes to mind right now, one of the piyutim that we say on Erev Rosh Hashanah in the Slichas, it talks about being sent as an agent on behalf of the congregation. That's not meant for everybody to be saying. That was meant for the chazan to say. But it's kind of developed over the years. Everybody says it, and the whole poem is a nice poem that makes sense for everybody to say. So there's one or two sentences in there that don't really belong, but they crept in. So there's many, many things like that. Because it was originally done in a way that it was the chazan saying it, that everybody was listening, and there was like a refrain that everybody was responding. So things developed because of that. Let me give you an example, and here's where I want you to open the siddur where we looked at page 309. 309 at the bottom, you have there the last four verses of Psalm 118. The last four verses read, Hodel Hashem k'tev k'le'olam chastoi, offer praise to the Lord for He is good. Yoimana Yisrael k'le'olam chastoi, let Israel declare that His kindness. If you're looking at the English side or the Hebrew side, I'm reading the bold sentences. Yoimana Beis Aaron, the house of Aaron, should declare His kindness everlasting. Yoimana Yireh Hashem, turning over to the next page, those who fear. Right? Those are the last four verses of, the first four verses of Psalm 118. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Now, the way this was designed to say, not when you're reciting Psalms, but in the context of saying Hallel with the congregation, the way this was designed to say was that the one leading the congregation says those four verses, but there's one refrain that everybody keeps on repeating. You know what that refrain is? The same first verse. So the way it used to be done is that the chazan says, everybody responds. Then the chazan moves on to the second verse, and everybody responds back to the first verse. Then the chazan moves on to the third verse, and everybody's still responding with the first verse. Then the chazan moves on to the fourth verse, and everybody again responds with the first verse.
Not repeating.
Is that Chabad?
Nowadays, I don't know that anybody does it that way, but that's the original way it was done, right? Now, then how did it develop from there? It developed from there that the congregation, let's say verse 2, right? The congregation are responding, Hodel Hashem k'tov k'le'olam chastoi. They're responding to verse 2 by repeating verse 1. And then the chazan is about to start verse 3. So, but the community, we feel left out. We also want to say verse 3. So we started saying verse 3 in an undertone together with the chazan. And then, so instead of just, when the Chazan says verse 1, verse 2, instead of just responding with verse 1, we're responding with verse 1 and preempting him saying verse 3 together with him. Until that became the standardized text, which is why if you look over here, you'll see that after the Chazan says verse 2, that's the second paragraph for the first line in bold, that's verse 2. What does it say? Congregation, what does the congregation respond? That's verse 1. And then, that's verse 3. Right? So, the theme that you see over here, and here it's Psalms, which was perhaps more familiar, it took a lot longer for this to become standardized with other more obscure poems, that the section of the poem that was designed, the poem was designed to be something that the Chazan says, and there's like one refrain that everybody repeats. And then it sort of slowly over time developed that not only is the whole community repeating that refrain, but they're also saying what the Chazan says. Right? Now, turn back to V'chol Ma'aminim. We call this piyut V'chol Ma'aminim because it's developed. We think that the V'chol Ma'aminim is the beginning of a line, but as I already pointed out to you, actually V'chol Ma'aminim is the middle of the line. The beginning of the line is the way it's printed here, it's backwards. Really, we should call this song Ha'oiches Biyad Midas Mishpat. That's the name of the song. That's the first line. And the way it was designed is that the Chazan calls out Ha'oiches Biyad Midas Mishpat. He holds in his hand the attribute of judgment. And everybody responded, that was the Chazan said, everybody responded with a refrain. All believe that he is a faithful judge. Then the Chazan called out, he probes and preaches, he probes and searches hidden secrets, and everybody called out, they were responding to his with a matching statement. You're saying something, and the Chazan is making a statement about Hashem, and we as the congregation are in unison saying, yes, we all believe this, and we're using slightly different words to bring out the same point, because in service of the poetry of it, right? We're not just going to repeat the same words. Now, that's how it was originally done, just like Hallel. Then it develops further that the congregation was not just saying V'chol Ma'aminim Shahu, whatever. They were also preempting to say what the Chazan said. So it became, the Chazan says Ha'oiches Biyad Midas Mishpat. Everybody responds V'chol Ma'aminim Shokei Lamuna Ha'oichen Aveidik in Zainistaris. So that was going on for so many years until they came along with the new printed editions, and they're like, hold on, these lines are printed all weird. The lines are printed, but that's not how we say it. We all know, we go to shul and we say it the other way around. We say, so they started printing it differently as well. And now, the uninformed reader is going to open this up and say, hey, this makes no sense. This is not even a sentence. He remembers the covenant and gives life to all beings. The sentence is supposed to be he apportions life to all living beings, and all believe that he lives and is eternal, right? But now you see how over the years these different stages developed into the way it's printed over here now, and to the way we sing it now, and to the way it's printed here now. But now you can understand what's really going on over here and how we got to where we got today. It's interesting that so many great rabbis overlooked this very obvious thing. And you have in certain recent Sefarim, pilpulim, like these logical acrobatics, trying to explain, oh, you know what? It says, he said, I'll give you here, in this article he has a number of examples. I'll just give you one example. He says, you go to the third line, all believe that he probes man's thoughts. He redeems from death and delivers from the grave. So he writes like this. Why do we believe that he probes man's hidden thoughts? Because we see he can do miracles that redeem from the death and delivers from the grave. So if he can do miracles, it must be that he could probe man's thoughts. Right? And so there are authors of recent years, who try to go through the whole poem in this and try to make sense of these non-connected sentences as if they're supposed to be a sentence, but they're missing the whole point. This was never supposed to be a sentence. Okay. So now that we understand the build of it, I want to go through the just line by line, explain what's going on, and like I said, I mean, obviously we could use it. We're going to use the English that we have in front of us, but we'll see there are some inaccuracies over here that hopefully we'll understand a little bit better when we're done with this.
You said this
So-
happened, but what happened? Why did it happen? Or,
Why did what happen?
well, that these lines shifted from.
Because the congregation started, again, it starts off with, I say A, you respond B.
Right.
Then that further develops into you responding B and preempting me with C.
Okay.
So now you're saying B and C. Now really what you're doing is B is the end of A and C is the introduction to D. But because you're saying in one breath B and C, it started sounding as if B and C is supposed to be its own sentence. So then they started printing it as if B and C were their own sentence. But really B is the end of A and C is the beginning of D.
But they must know. what
Who's
you
they?
know, right? I don't know whoever these people.
They is some dude
Why
who-
they decided to print it this way. I mean,
There's a famous expression in Yiddish which goes a bacher azetze. Bacher azetze means literally it means the bachelor typesetter. But what it means is that not necessarily are the people who are in charge of formatting the page the most learned or paying attention to what they're doing. They're just trying to get the job done. And there's many mistakes that have crept into our liturgy because of Bachar Azetzer, and we always have this question. I mean, I could go on. You know what? When we're done here with this, if we have time or after the official class, whatever, I'll show you a very funny mistake that has crept in, and we all say this every year on Sukkot. It makes absolutely no sense, and we all say it. And then we have another question to ask: like, at what point do we say, okay, this is so obviously a mistake, we should change it or not? And I think it might depend also where it is in davening. I could show you. That's a little bit of a dilemma, and again, I'm happy to show you examples. But first, I want to go through this. So, the source that I'm using for the next part of the class is from Rabbi Goldschmidt. Olav Hashalom is Machzer. Rabbi Goldschmidt, we used his, for those who were here on Tisha B'Av, we used his kinnis. He's a very big scholar of our liturgy, and we go through. So the first thing is Ha'oiches biyad midas mishpat, which is a paraphrase of a verse in the parsha of Hazino, which talks and the Medrash explains that it means that Hashem sticks to the judgment. So the Chazan says that Hashem is the God of judgment, and then we all respond, yes, we all believe that He is indeed a Keil Emunah, He is a judge, a God that we could trust in judgment. Okay, then we move on. So that seems to be very, very obvious. Again, in the footnotes here, all of these words are actually, besides following the sequence of the Aleph base, they're not just random words, but they're actually every single phrase of this whole song, as many songs, is paraphrasing usually a pasuk. Sometimes it might be paraphrasing a statement of Chazal, but for the most part, it's paraphrasing a pasuk. So if you look in this Machla, every single phrase, he gives you the reference of where the pasuk that he's paraphrasing is. Then it says, "Hagoyel mimavas ufayda mishachas v'chol ma'aminim she'hagoyel chazak." So he redeems. We know that. Hadon yechidi leboya olam. He is the only judge or the singular judge to those who come in the world. So here it's perhaps not so much a pasuk, but this is based on a Mishnah. We have the Mishnah in Avis, which famous Mishnah in Avis, She'in don yichidi ela echad. God is the only singular judge. He's the only one who could judge on his own. So that's don yichidi. And the word baya olam is interesting. In Rosh Hashanah liturgy, in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur liturgy, we refer to us humans as baya olam, those who come into the world. Many times, and the first source for that is in the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, in Unasana Toikef, the famous song Unasana Toikef. Also, we say V'chol Boi Olam Evening Levanach Givnei Marim, which is a paraphrase from the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. So that's somewhat of an interesting terminology, which is borrowed from the Mishnah. Hehogui Be'eye Asher Eye V'chol Ba'aminim She'hoya Heva V'yiyeh. Right? Again, I'm reading the sentences in the way that they make sense, not in the way that they're published. So Hashem is called Eya Asher Eya. Where is God? Where do we find God called Eya Asher Eya? Where? By the burning bush, right? When he says to Moshe, Moshe says, "What's your name?" Moses says, "What's your name?" And he says, "Eya Asher." So he is called Eya Asher Eya, and then we respond, we believe that God is, was, and will be, which I think is a better. I don't know why he put in the English the I. The thought doesn't say I. Yeah. Oh no, don't, yeah, sorry, yeah. He is called I will be what I will be, which means, like Chazal explained, what that statement means is that I was, is, and will be. Okay. Now the next sentence is a very strange sentence, which actually you'll see a. This is one of the mistakes that have crept into the way it's commonly recited. The next sentence in the Hebrew is Havadai Shemoi Kain Tehilosei, which in this. In the English rendition, if you're looking at the third to last line on page 226, it's sure is his name, likewise his praise. Okay, a little bit of an obscure sentence, but actually it's a mistake. So, first of all, Michael, you've spent some time in Israel. What does the word vadai mean?
Certainly.
Certainly, right? So, usually the word vadai means certainly. It means like certain as opposed to doubt. Okay? But actually, if you look through the way the word vadai is used in rabbinic Hebrew, you will see that the word vadai has another two meanings, which you could also, if you think
of course.
Yeah, 1 second, but you could also see how these other definitions are very much associated. The second meaning is literally. Chazal use the word vadai to mean literally. Right? Very often we find that in Chazal, that it means literally. And also we find that the word vadai means true. Again, words which we could understand etymologically, how you might have the same word for certain, truth, and literally. Those are connected themes. So that's what the word vadai means. It means all of those three things together. And actually, we find in the Gemara clearly, it's a Gemara in Brachos, clearly that there's a whole story over there, because we, in our Amidah, what do we start off? We describe God as being Hakel, HaGadol, HaGibor, HaNora, right? The God who is Gadol, Gibor, Nera, great, Gadol, great, Gibor, mighty, Nera, and awesome, right? So the Gemara tells a story how there was somebody who went to the Amid to lead the congregation in prayer, and he continued with numerous other Adir, Nechba, he gave other descriptions to Hashem. And basically he was told, no, you can't do that, because if you're saying more, then you're kind of saying, oh, I'm going to exhaust the list, and obviously you can never exhaust the list. So therefore we just stick to those four, which is a paraphrase of a pasuk in Chumash, which Moshe Rabbeinu used, and then you say, I'm not exhausting the list of praising Hashem, I'm just quoting what Moshe Rabbeinu said. So in the list of examples that Chazan who was told to stop said, one of the descriptions that he gave for God was Havadai. That God is Vadai. What does that mean, God is Vadai? You wouldn't translate that as God is certain, but if we know that the word Vada could mean truth, then Havadai, God is the true existence, God is the true being, right? The famous words of the Rambam, God is the only true existence, right? Now, shelve all that for a moment. There is a pasuk in Tehillim which says, Kishimcha likim kein tehilasechem. Kishmoi kain, which was paraphrased as Kishmoi kain tehilasei, which literally it means like his name is his praise, which is in simple English that would mean he lives up to the things he's praised for. In other words, we call him Honest Bob, and he lives up to it. Kishmoi kain tehilasei, we could praise him like the way we're referring to him. Right? Now, let's look back at this line in Hebrew. So again, you see the English, the third to last line, they've translated it as, sure is his name, likewise his praise. Again, somewhat of an obscure sentence. I'm not sure if you could, I don't know what that word, sure is his name, likewise is his praise, doesn't mean anything to me. It's just a bunch of words put together that don't mean anything. But actually, now let's look at the Hebrew, if you have it there. Havadai Shemoi Kein Tehilasei. So first of all, what you have to know is that there's a letter missing. There's a letter that got skipped out of this sentence, again, by the Bachar Azetza, by somebody who didn't know what he was doing, and he thought, hey, this sounds weird, and he thought maybe he would...
Should be a comma between Shmo and Cain?
No, there should be a comma between Havadai and Shmoi, but more importantly, before the word Shmoi, there should be a kaf. Kishmoi.
Because the translation says sure is his name.
Right.
So it should be
but it's complete.
Shmo, comma.
No, because it's completely mistranslated. The way it's supposed, what the line is supposed to say is Havadai,
comma.
Havadai, comma.
Certain.
No. Havadai. What did we say? Havadai could mean truth. Havadai, God is the true existence, and then you're supposed to add a kaf. Kishmoi came to Hilasa. He lives up to his praise. So the correct translation for that sentence is the true existence. Who God is the true being. Yeah, that's Havadai, the true being. Kishmoi came to Hilasa, and he lives up to his praise. Do you see how somebody again? What's the Seder Hishtalshus? How does all this happen? What happens is the Bachar Azetza, the typesetter, he's like Havadai Shemoi. What does Havadai mean? That doesn't make any sense. Havadai Kishmoi. Oh, maybe I'm supposed to take off the kaf, and it's Havadai Shemoi. His name is certain. Now, his name is certain doesn't mean anything, but certain is like his name means even less than that. So the Bachar Azetza, who doesn't understand this, thinks he's making things better by deleting that kaf, but actually he's made.
How do you know that was deleted? How do you have other versions?
Yeah. There's manuscript. Yeah, now we have manuscripts. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I could even show you.
I was going to ask this before with this Hayah why there isn't above.
Hoya is a phrase, but actually,
it's Shehu Hayah Hoveh. Why isn't it by Hayah V'Hoveh?
no, because the sentence is Hoya V'Yeh. That is a legitimate sentence. Although you happen to be right that Hoya V'Yeh is also not the way it originally was in the manuscripts. In the original manuscripts, it was Hoya V'Yeh or Hoya V'Yehi V'Yeh. But it developed into Hoya V'Yeh, and I don't have a problem with that because that makes sense. That's a legitimate sentence.
No, usually you say V'Hu Hayah, V'Hu Hoveh, V'Hu Yeh. Right?
No, but in other places.
Yeah, but here it has one vav.
But this you find in other places also. Because in English you have the same sentence structure also. When you have a whole list of things, you do comma, and, right? Say,
okay.
Go buy me milk, yogurt, lox, and cheese. You don't say buy me milk and yogurt and lox and cheese. You say milk, comma, yogurt, comma, lox, comma, and cheese. No, comma, and cheese, right? So you could do that in Hebrew also.
Okay.
But if you look here, this is a machzor that was printed in Vermeisa in Worms in, I don't know exactly the year, but many hundreds of years ago. And here you could see Havadai Kishmoi came, right? So the guy is trying to make it better. And then the next, he's trying to make it better, makes it worse by deleting that kaf. And then the guys translating this into English are trying to scratch their heads and make sense out of this nonsensical sentence. And they end up with sure is his name, likewise his praise, which doesn't mean anything.
So is that version from Worms considered the original?
No, if you look closely at this version from Worms, with other mistakes. But
Okay.
again, if you want to, we do.
From when?
Because this is the critical edition.
Okay.
The critical edition is done by somebody who's, this guy Goldschmidt literally combed every single manuscript under the sun.
Found the earliest manuscript from wherever, 1020 or 20,
he
or
found
1100 or whatever.
And there's, again, I'm not an academic researcher. I don't know all the rules, but there's rules of how you determine what's most likely to be the original. In other words, even if you don't have the first print of something or the earliest manuscript, but if you have dozens of manuscripts from 100 years later, and 90% of them say it one way and 10% of them say it another way, then you could reasonably assume that the 90% are closer to the original than the 10%. So again, these are all methods that archaeologists and researchers use, which I don't need to do all that research. I trust the critical edition.
I would imagine there's more mistakes made with poems.
Oh, of course, 100%.
Bacher printer, what I think.
The Bacher Zetzer, yeah.
Is that the Bacher printer? Okay.
The typesetter. Zetzer is a
What
typesetter.
about Shira Shirim? I was just thinking.
No,
Are there any mistakes in there? I mean,
no, because again, if you look in, for example, in critical editions of the Bible of Scripture, in the entire 24 books of the Scripture, you're going to find, what you could count on a hand or two variations and tiny variations. Not anything like this, because that's something which there were many more manuscripts of way before the printing press. Everybody was doing this. Is something which, again, first of all, not everybody said this. In some shuls they said this, in some shuls they said another poem, in some shuls they said another poem. It took centuries until it sort of became canonized into this is what everybody says. And then even after that, there was only one copy to go for the whole city. And we're all spoiled. We're each holding our own machzor in our hand. Once upon a time, you just stood there listening to the chazan saying it.
Was this made while the Rabbi was alive?
First of all, no. And secondly, even the things that were made while the Rabbi was alive, the Rabbi wrote numerous times that it's full of mistakes.
Well, that's what I was saying.
The Rabbi didn't take responsibility to edit every, he didn't have time for that. And we spoke about this recently. If you remember one of the nights between Mincha Ma'ariv, I'm pretty sure you were there, about different mistakes that have crept into the Chabad Siddur. Mm-hmm. And some of them have been fixed in the annotated Siddur, and some of them have not. Mm-hmm. Okay. If we move on to the next line, the last line, So this is an interesting one. There's an interesting phrase which we say in Avinu Malkeinu. We say it in a number of places. Zachrenu, you might remember this from Avinu Malkeinu. Zachrenu b'zikaron tov lefanecha. Does that ring a bell? Remember us in a good remembrance before you. What does it mean to remember us in a good remembrance? So remember us in a good remembrance is a sort of poetic way of saying remember us for favor, remember us for the good. So here also, hazoichel amaskir of tov v'zichronis is that same sort of poetic phraseology, remember us for the good. Okay? He remembers us for the good. We're not going to have time to go through all of them, but again, most of them are translated accurately, but there are a number of mistakes. I want to look at this one, which I pointed out before, the Lamed. So if you're looking on page 227 on the left column, on the Hebrew side, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Halam b'seisa b'tzeil shadai, which in the English is translated as he, the omnipotent, abides in mystery and shadow. So here also the person who translated this seemed to not really understand what was going on. And because of that, he switched around the order of the words to try and make it into a sensible sentence, which he did a not bad job of, but it's actually not what's going on over here. So in order to explain what's going on, I'm going to ask you to turn your siddur, leave the machs where it is.
No, it's translated backwards.
Yes, but that's often the case. Often we translate...
Halan means like he dwelt, like slept, or, you know...
Yeah, the way they translated is Halam b'seisa b'tzeil, he abides in mystery and shadow, comma,
Yeah.
Shaddai, the omnipotent. So in English, we often, the structure of sentences in different languages, often the order of words gets switched around. I always say this, do any of you guys speak any German? In English, one of the differences between English and German, even though English, historically, a lot of English grammar comes from German. Sorry, a lot of English words come from German, but grammatically, English has very structured sentences. So I would have to say English has very structured sentences. I wouldn't say very structured sentences English has. And I wouldn't say sentences English had very structured. Right? You have to say English has very structured sentences. Whereas in German, you could pretty much say that sentence in any order and it would make sense. Mm-hmm. So that's why to make poems in Yiddish, and even in Hebrew, but certainly in Yiddish, is so much, if you want to make the poem rhyme, it's so much easier in Yiddish than in English. Because as long as you have any word in the sentence that rhymes, you put that word at the end of the sentence, and you have a poem. Whereas in English, you can't put any word at the end of a sentence. The sentence has to be structured in a certain way in order for the sentence to make sense. Right? So I'm just pointing out how you could... anyway, so leave your machzor where it is. Turn your siddur to page 186. Right, this is Psalm 91 of Tehillim. Right, Yoishev b'seiser elyon b'tzeil shada yisloinam. 186, the last two lines of the page in the Hebrew.
Oh, down. Oh, okay.
Right, Yoishev b'seiser elyon b'tzeil shada yisloinam. You who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Omnipotent, I say to you of the Lord, who is my refuge and my stronghold, my God in whom I trust. Right? So that's the introduction to this psalm. What's going on over here? The psalmist, the person talking over here, is addressing his fellow friend, and he's telling him, you, my friend, who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and abides in the shadow of the Omnipotent, I'm going to say these things to you about the God in whose shadow you are resting. Right? That is indeed the normative translation of this verse. However, if you look in the Targum of this psalm, he actually translates it differently. He translates it as if you are referring to God Himself as dwelling in the shelter. The way the Targum puts it is, just a moment. The one who read the Ashrei Shchinte Beroze Elo Betlala Na Yikar Deshade Yavis, the Shindal Yud Yavis. You have God who makes His Shekhinah, His presence, be in the most high secret, and puts himself in the shadow. So again, the normative translation of the pasuk is the way it says it here in the English on 186. But there is also this alternative interpretation to the pasuk comes from the Targum, which it says that we're not talking. It's not the psalmist talking to another person. It's the psalmist addressing God Himself and saying that you, God, cloak yourself in this most high abides, etc. Right? Now, if you look at this line in the V'chol Ma'aminim that we're looking at, it's very clearly a paraphrase of this first verse of Psalm 91. And he's saying, based on the Targum's interpretation of the Psalm, Halon b'seiser b'tzeil Shaddai, that you, Hashem, put yourself in the mystery of in the how are we translating this? You put yourself in the shadow, right? You, Hashem, put yourself in the shadow. Okay, so I'm just looking now. The English is not so wrong. What's wrong is really the comma in the Hebrew side. The English is okay, right? The omnipotent abides in mystery and in shadow. Fine, that's kind of correct. But what's incorrect is the comma on the right-hand side. It's supposed to be in the shadow of the omnipotent. That's what the pasuk says. B'tzeil Shaddai, Halon b'seiser b'tzeil Shaddai. Right? It's not. They've put. I'm not sure why they've done it that way. Anyway, that comma seems to be, to me at least, seems to be out of place. Okay. Again, I think that the most. Obviously, we could go through the whole thing and show you each verse. Each line is being a paraphrase of a different verse, but I think that might get a bit tedious, and is not really necessary to appreciate what the poem is saying. Other than, again, as you're singing it, paying attention to those commas and singing it in a way that actually makes sense. Now, I promised you to show you some other mistakes that have crept into the Siddur. Yes?
Sukkah.
Sukkahs. Okay, let's start with Sukkahs. Before we go to Sukkahs, I'll give you something a little bit more basic. Turn to page 172. So we say this every Friday night. Everybody knows it. So in the middle over there it says, we will thank Him every day continually, which is translated here as in accordance with the blessings of that day. Right? Again, in accordance with the blessings of that day, a little bit of an obscure wording. Now, what besides it being a little bit obscure, what's even more strange about it is that this paragraph, Magen Avos, is designed to be a shorthand version, an abbreviated version of the entire Friday night Amidah. So the first words is Magen Avos B'dvaris, the shield of our fathers. That corresponds to the first bracha. The next one is Mechayim Eisim B'mamara, He resurrects the dead. That's the second bracha. Hakel HaKadosh, the Holy God. That's the third bracha, etc., etc. But the final bracha, what's the final bracha of the Amidah? Hamavarech Hasam Yisrael B'Shalom, right? God blessing your people with peace. That's missing. So that's missing, and in its place we have this obscure wording, Me'ein habrachis, in accordance with the blessings. What does in accordance with the blessings even mean? Right? But actually, this is a mistake that crept in, and the way this mistake crept in is because it's a convergence of the Babylonian and the Israeli nusach. In other words, our Amidah comes from Bavel, from Babylonia, but this piyut comes from Israel. And in Israel, they had a different text to the final bracha of the Amidah. The final bracha of the Amidah was not Hamavarech Es Ami Yisrael B'Shalom, but rather it was Ma'oin habrachis, not Me'ein with a yud, but Ma'oin with a vav, which means headquarters or stronghold. Yeah, headquarters. Ma'oin habrachis. Hashem is the headquarters of blessing. Right. So originally, this paragraph, these words said Ma'oin habrachis, the headquarters of blessing, which is again, like every other word in this paragraph, a paraphrase to abbreviate the Amidah that we've just said. But because it then developed into becoming into our siddur, which is the Babylonian siddur. So that what's ma'oin habrachas? Where's that coming from? So somebody made some mistake somewhere to try and make things better by changing the ma'oin to me'ain. And
what's the substantive difference between? I mean, I know
the two different words.
No, I know, but what was the objection? I don't get it.
It wasn't I don't know that it was a conscious objection. It was just confusion. It was what does ma'oin habrachas mean? In other words, if you're not familiar with the Israeli, again, nobody today does this, but with the original historically Israeli siddur, which had, insteed of Hamavarech Esam Yisrael Bashalim, they had Baruch Ata Hashem Ma'on HaBrachas, then the word Ma'on HaBrachas wouldn't make any sense to you, and how does this come in over here? So, because again, what we're looking for is a paraphrase of the Amidah. So somehow, we could go and start analyzing all the manuscripts and figure out exactly how and when and who's the person who changed it, whatever it is. But again, this is a quote-unquote mistake that has become canonized in our siddur, and we're kind of stuck with it. Now, I'm going to show you go to Sukkos.
Do we object to being stuck with it, or is it something
So
that's accepted?
So it depends. I think the answer is depends.
There are other things we're stuck with that some of us are unhappy with.
Yes.
And it seems like that there's no modernization or ability to change to either back to what's original or to make things.
So I think that I don't know. I grapple with that question a little bit. I think that it depends where. If it's in something like V'chol Ma'aminim. V'chol Ma'aminim is a poem that there's 100 different variations of. There's no sort of text that's been authorized by some great rabbi saying this is the way you're supposed to say it. It's not like, this is in the Chabad Machzor because some Chabad rabbi decided,
But if it's attached to an author's specific.
Whereas the siddur, which the Arizal went through the siddur, and the Arizal was careful about every single letter that went into the actual siddur, right? And those who followed up, the Alter Rebbe is one example of many who had a Nusach HaArizal, they were okay with Me'ein HaBrachos. So it's interesting as an academic tidbit that historically this used to say Ma'on HaBrachos and it was changed, but practically speaking we're not going to change the way we say it because this is something which for hundreds of years by now has been okayed by people who are expert in and who are being careful about every letter of the Siddur. Whereas when it's something that's less intrinsic in the Siddur and perhaps it makes more sense to change things a little bit. And I believe...
So it's not like taking a Shakespearean play.
I
don't like the way
exactly.
He said... thou shalt, and saying you shalt.
I'll give you another example of something which I saw myself. The Rebbe, in his later years, difficult reading things, they used to make copies of for certain things. They would make copies of the Rebbe in very large print. So I once saw somebody who had the actual copies that the Rebbe used for slichas. That this person had those copies and was using them. And I asked him if I could look through it. So there is a poem that we say twice. We say it in the Ne'ilah prayer at the very end of Yom Kippur, and we say that very same poem in Slichas on Erev Rosh Hashanah in the morning. And in that poem it has the words V'seitiv lanu hachasima, give us a good sealing, right? As in like sealing us for a new year. Which that matches for Ne'ilah, because in Ne'ilah all the times which until Ne'ilah we talk about inscribing us for a new year are switched to seal us for a good year, right? Now, in that copies that the Rebbe used, there was a little handwritten note on the side, not in the Rebbe's handwriting. I don't know who wrote it, but it was in those papers, where it added in "V'seitiv lanu haksiva v'hachasima." Give us a good inscription and a good sealing, because when you're saying it on the Ne'ilah, you're only saying a sealing, but when you're saying it on Rosh Hashanah, you also talk about a good inscription, right? But that's the thing. How does that mistake happen? It's very simple, because you're doing copy and paste. The same. Don't forget, this is before printing was so easy, and it was just like, turn to Ne'ilah. You know that poem you said in Ne'ilah? Say it now also. So it's very easy in that transfer of cut and paste, or copy paste, for that detail to go missing. That at this stage it makes more sense to say it one way and another way, and so to me, in such a type of thing like V'chol Ma'aminim, if you see an obvious mistake, I personally don't have a problem with switching it. Me'ein HaBrachos, I'm not going to touch. There are other things like the next example, which I'm going to show you, which I'm not sure about. I'm not sure which category it falls onto, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it. But I'm not going to refrain from showing it to you I'm not trying to hold anything back. This is we're being intellectually honest over here. I think so. If you turn to page 381. So this is the fine in the Chabad minhag, at least. Other minhagim have a lot more, but in the Chabad minhag, this is the final of all the poems that we say on Hoshana Rabbah after all the times that we circle the bima with the lulav and esrog. And of course, there's many different aspects to this poem. The most obvious one that you'll see right away is that it goes in the order of the aleph base. So the first word is oimetz. That's aleph. If you go to in the Hebrew, that actually happens to be the the first word of the next line, ba. That's the base. Then, sorry, the next line, right? Koil gishtei gimel. The next line, koil dofak daled, right? So it goes in the order of the aleph base. Now, I'm sorry. There's one thing that appears strange right away at first glance, is that every single one of the sentences, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, etc., are all preceded with the word Coil, voice, besides the first one. The first one, Aleph, just starts Oimetz. It's not Coil Oimetz, it's just Oimetz. And then you have Coil, Babiri Veiskitim, Coil, Gishte B'Shefa Liska, Coil, Dafak Veitzitz Zarach, Coil, Heikim, right? Always Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, preceded by the word Coil. Do you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes it's difficult to understand. So first of all, it's just strange. Why does the first sentence missing the word Coil? But more than that is that the word Coil doesn't really fit. And if you try to translate the sentences into English, you're often going to struggle with translating the word Coil. So, for example,
It puts it at the end of the sentence. Translations.
it heralds, the voice heralds. Yeah. Because, but besides that, let me give you an example here. Just a second. Coil, Shem, Rishayim, let's see. Yeah, so by switching it, the word coil means voice, right? So by switching, by translating it as the voice heralds, and putting it at the end of a sentence, the English translation here have dealt with a lot of the issues. But if you look, for example, at the second to last one, the name of the wicked will be annihilated, but loving kindness will be shown to David. His anointed, the voice heralds. If you put in the Hebrew, it's still a very strange sentence. Koil Shem Rishayim Lahavid. Okay, look, they're very creative the way they've come up with translating it as the voice heralds and putting it at the end of all the sentences. You deal with a lot of the issues. But actually, if you realize for a minute, again, all based on manuscripts, what actually is going on over here, you don't need any of this. What's going on over here is that look at the one line before this paragraph. What does that line say? Koil Mavasim Mavasim Omer. The voice heralds, brings good tidings and proclaims, right? And then what does the line afterwards say? Koil Mavasim Mavasim Omer. So this is a poem surrounding that refrain, Koil Mavasim Mavasim Omer. Now, originally the word Koil was printed without vowels, in small letters, at the end of each sentence, and it was an indication that after each sentence you're supposed to go back and repeat that refrain. Just like, for example, on Friday night, where we say L'chadoidi, so the refrain is L'chadoidi L'kras Kala, and then after each paragraph, it says, and now, in the annotated Siddur, you wouldn't see this, but if you look, for example, in the old style Chabad Siddur, Friday night davening, it doesn't actually have L'chadoidi printed in between each sentence. It just has in small afterwards the word lecha, And that tells you, go back and repeat the refrain. So originally, the way this poem was supposed to be said was there was this little word coil at the end, which indicated to you to repeat that refrain. So you would say, and then you would say, right? And then, somehow, through the years of different Bachar Azetzes, as we're calling them, they added vowels to the word coil and sort of arbitrarily attached it to the beginning of each sentence. And so you have this word coil at the beginning of each sentence, which becomes very difficult to translate. And that's why it's not there on the first sentence, because it was never there. That is the refrain. You follow?
Yeah.
Bill, you follow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was you asked for another example. There you go.
So I have
Yes.
a question for you. Kol Mavasir, what's the actual, what is Mavasir with the Ruza?
Like Basura. Like good news. Mavasir, give Basurot Tavot, exactly.
So is it Kol Mavasir, it's the voice of the one who brings good, brings good and says?
Yeah. Kol Mavasir, the voice of the one heralding good news. Mavasir V'omer is heralding and saying da-da-da-da-da.
Okay.
But now it doesn't have to fit within that following sentence. It's just a refrain to.
Oh, I want to say Kol Mavasir, of the voice of the one who brings good, he brings good and he speaks and he says.
Yeah, and I can't tell you right now offhand where, but I'm fairly certain that it's a paraphrase of a verse somewhere in the prophets.
Okay.
Okay, now we don't have any time left, but if you'll just indulge me for 2 more minutes, in response to a question that I believe you, Bill, asked last week or somebody asked last week about the 100 sounds of the shofar. So, the kitzur is like this. We mentioned already last week that we have this doubt about what does the teruah in the Torah mean. Does it refer to the wailing or to the sobbing or to the combination of both, which is what brings us to the shvarim, teruah, or the combination of shvarim, teruah. So the mechanism of it goes like this. We have the story of Devorah and Barak killing Sisera in the book of Judges, and basically Yael, she captures Sisera and she gets him drunk, and then she stabs him in the temples. Vaguely ring a bell, maybe? It's the Haftarah of Beshalach. And then there's the Shiras Dvorah, where there's a whole song about praising Hashem for all the miracles that happened in those battles. And those songs finish off with Sisera's mother being described as looking out the window, waiting for her son to return. And over there she's described as Vatayabev, as crying. Now that word Vatayabev, crying, is the same word that Unclus uses to translate the Torah word teruah. So now we're putting our puzzle pieces together. That teruah means Yibava, per Targum Unclus. Yibava Vatiyabevim Sisra, that's the same verb as what the mother of Sisra was doing. So we know she was crying for her son. So then when people cry out of grief, they could be groaning or wailing or a combination of both. So that brings us to those three opinions. Now, there is a tradition brought in Tosfos that she cried 100 wails. So because the mother of Sisra cried 100 wails, that's why it became customary to do 100 shofar blasts on Rosh Hashanah. Now, what's the conceptual? Okay, it seems to just be like some sort of hibujab of words, but what's actually conceptually the connection between Sisra and shofar that we should try to compare them? So many different suggestions have been made, but I'll just say one very short thought is that it could be conceptually that it's the same, the whole idea of shofar, Rosh Hashanah, returning to Hashem, and like we spoke last week, the different reasons for shofar, of us calling out to Hashem like a child calls out to his father, etc., and the father looking for the teshuvah of the son. So here you have this description in sort of graphic detail of the mother waiting for her son to return. So the shofar is mimicking that. It's the voice of Hashem waiting for us to return to Him. So that's some sort of thing. It's also brought down, by the way. Okay, there's again much more to be said, but that's certainly one thing that could one.